When the screen lit up with the image of a tough, resolute, and silent man, Charles Bronson etched himself into the minds of millions as an icon of resilience and justice. He was the solitary cowboy, the crime-hunting cop, the cold and unyielding hero. Yet behind that cinematic glow, Charles Bronson was also a veteran, a man who had faced the harsh realities of war. And it's from that post-war life that the stark truths about a lesser-known side of him began to emerge, painting a more authentic, more heartbreaking picture of a great but deeply wounded man. Who was Charles Bronson? Before becoming a big screen icon, Charles Bronson, whose real name was Charles Dennis Bukinski, was born into a poor Lithuanian-American mining family in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania. His life tasted hardship early on, which, in part, shaped his later resilience and toughness. When World War II erupted, Bukinski joined the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1943, serving as an aerial gunner on a B-29 bomber, participating in many intense combat missions in the Pacific Theater. This military experience not only forged him physically and mentally, but also left deep, silent imprints that affected his character and career. After being discharged from the military and experiencing various manual labor jobs, Bukinski stumbled into acting. He began his acting career in the early 1950s, frequently taking on supporting roles often as thugs, criminals, or taciturn characters with a rugged appearance. But with talent and persistence, he gradually made his mark. By the late 1960s, his career soared. Under the stage name Charles Bronson, changed in 1956 amidst the Cold War to avoid associations with his Eastern European origins, he shot to global fame as a renowned action star. Bronson's on-screen persona was a distinctive hero, strong, quiet, with cold eyes, yet harboring complex inner depths. He frequently portrayed roles requiring resilience, direct confrontation with evil, and a willingness to use violence to mete out justice. From his role as Bernardo O'Reilly in The Magnificent Seven, 1960, the escaped convict Danny Valinsky in The Great Escape, 1963, or the mysterious harmonica in the Western masterpiece Once Upon a Time. In the West? 1968, Charles Bronson left an indelible mark. However, the film series that propelled him to superstardom and cemented his Avenger icon status was Death Wish, beginning in 1974. In the role of Paul Kersey, an architect who becomes a vigilante after his family is attacked, Bronson redefined the revenge film genre and became the face of public outrage against crime. Charles Bronson's illustrious career spanned decades, making him one of the highest-paid actors in the world at his peak. He was not just a box office star, but also a cultural icon representing a generation of screen heroes with a stoic, quiet demeanor, yet decisive action. However, few knew that beneath that indomitable exterior, the veteran Charles Bronson still carried indelible scars from the past harsh realities that the glamorous silver screen could not conceal. The military years that shaped Bronson. To truly understand the harsh realities Charles Bronson faced, we need to go back to his time in the military. It's a less discussed part of his life compared to his illustrious film career, but it had a profound impact on the man he later became. Charles Dennis Bukinski, Bronson's real name, enlisted in the United States Army Air Forces in 1943, right when World War II was at its most intense. He wasn't a ground soldier fighting directly in the trenches. Instead, he was trained to be an aerial gunner on a B-29 Super Fortress heavy bomber. This was a strategic long-range bomber, playing a crucial role in American air raids against Japan. As a crew member, Bronson's position was extremely vital and dangerous. He was responsible for operating the machine gun to defend the aircraft from enemy fighter attacks during missions that lasted hours in hostile skies. Bronson's service experience took place primarily in the Pacific Theater. He participated in many bombing missions directly facing dense anti-aircraft fire and fierce attacks from Japanese fighters. Each flight was a gamble with life and death, where the line between survival and demise was as thin as the B-29's metal skin. The psychological pressure, extreme tension, and constant proximity to death forged Bukinski into a hardened, stoic man, but simultaneously planted the seeds for deep internal wounds. Surviving these aerial battles required nerves of steel, quick reactions, and intense focus. Bronson witnessed horrific scenes, from seeing fellow aircraft shot down, other comrades killed, to his own near-death moments. These experiences not only helped him develop survival skills, but also etched into his soul a profound understanding of the brutal nature of war and the value of life. After the war ended and he was discharged in 1946, Charles Bronson carried with him not only invisible scars from the battlefield, but also hopes for a peaceful, stable life after years of military uncertainty. Like millions of other veterans, he hoped to reintegrate into society, build a career, and find happiness. However, reality was often much harsher than post-war dreams, and Charles Bronson was no exception. What he faced after returning home was the beginning of a challenging new chapter where the glamour of cinema couldn't yet erase the shadow of war memories and wounds. The harsh pain. Charles Bronson concealed. Returning from the war, Charles Bronson, like countless other veterans, was no longer the naive young man who had left home. Though he had escaped the jaws of death in the Pacific skies, he now faced a new battlefield, a grueling internal and societal struggle. What awaited him was not a warm welcome or ample support, but a series of harsh realities that cast a shadow over much of his life, hidden behind the glamour of a movie star. One of the biggest issues Bronson and many veterans faced was the difficulty of reintegrating into civilian life. The military creates a unique environment with strict discipline, close camaraderie, and clear goals fighting for survival. Upon returning to normal life, the loss of that structure often caused feelings of disorientation and emptiness. Charles Bronson, with his already quiet nature, likely became even more socially isolated. Reconnecting with family, friends, and civilian society was far from easy. Loved ones could hardly fully comprehend what he had gone through, the fears, the horrific scenes that haunted his mind. This led to an invisible barrier pushing him into loneliness even when in a crowd. Society's lack of understanding and empathy exacerbated this problem, making veterans feel abandoned and inadequately recognized for their sacrifices. Moreover, psychological issues were a persistent specter. Although Bronson never publicly spoke about suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or depression, the experiences of an aerial gunner on a B-29, constantly witnessing death and facing imminent danger, certainly left deep psychological scars. Sleep could be haunted by the sounds of bombs and gunfire, images of fallen comrades. Sudden loud noises could trigger fear reactions, and survivor's guilt could weigh heavily on his mind. The hardened, stoic demeanor we saw in Bronson on screen might have been a psychological defense mechanism, a way for him to cope with internal wounds. This not only affected his mental health, but also negatively impacted his personal relationships, making it difficult for him to open up and trust others. Economic and employment challenges were also a harsh reality. After his discharge, Bronson had no higher education or specialized vocational skills beyond what he learned in the military. Despite his adaptability and hard work, he had worked as a minor stevedore cook. Finding a stable, well-paying job in post-war society was incredibly difficult. The economy at the time was in transition, and the job market was not wide open for all veterans. Many, like Bronson, had to accept manual labor, low-paying jobs, struggling with living costs and housing issues. This lack of opportunity could lead to feelings of despair, disorientation, and erode the self-esteem of a soldier who had dedicated himself to his country. Additionally, physical health issues from his military service might have silently affected him. While there's no detailed information about Bronson's specific injuries serving in a wartime environment with high stress intensity and harsh conditions, often leaves long-term health consequences. These could be small accumulated injuries or underlying illnesses developed due to exposure during combat. These health problems not only caused physical pain, but also became a financial burden affecting his ability to work and his quality of life. Finally, and perhaps most heartbreakingly, the veteran support system was severely lacking at the time. Although the government had support programs, they were often inadequate, bogged down by bureaucracy, and did not reach everyone who needed them. Many veterans struggled to access medical benefits assistance or job placement support. The absence of a strong support network pushed many returning soldiers into a spiral of despair, homelessness, or social ills. Charles Bronson, though he later became a star, could not escape these feelings of injustice and abandonment during his first years after discharge. These harsh realities, though hidden beneath his tough exterior, and the spotlight profoundly shaped Charles Bronson's character, partly explaining his bitterness, skepticism, and reticence in real life. One of the most evident effects was the development of a bitter and skeptical personality. Charles Bronson's life was a series of challenges from his impoverished childhood, the brutal war to his early struggles to find his place in Hollywood. Having to face deprivation, society's indifference towards veterans, and perhaps unresolved psychological trauma made him cautious and less trusting of others. He wasn't the type of person to easily share his feelings or open up. Instead, he tended to withdraw and keep his distance. This social withdrawal was not just a personality trait, but also likely a defense mechanism, helping him protect himself from potential pain or disappointment. The Indelible Marks of Charles Bronson. Though Charles Bronson was a private man, rarely sharing details of his personal life, especially his inner turmoil, there are still anecdotes and indirect evidence that help us better understand into the harsh realities he endured. He wasn't just a star who appeared and disappeared from the screen, but a real person with scars, not only from action scenes, but from deep within his war memories. A prime example of the military's influence on Bronson lies directly in his personality and acting style. His taciturn demeanor, steely eyes, quiet but intense presence, and masterful ability to convey emotional restraint weren't just artistic choices. They reflected a part of his true self, a man who had experienced the high-pressure military environment where showing emotion was considered weakness. Many critics and colleagues noted that Bronson always carried an air of melancholy, a certain gruffness off-screen, which he successfully conveyed in his roles as outlaws or avengers. His expressive eyes often held a silent sorrow, a weariness from invisible burdens that no script ever needed to write. Furthermore, some close associates and biographers have hinted at Bronson having sleepless nights or nightmares, common signs of PTSD in veterans who have experienced psychological trauma. While there's no public medical evidence, these accounts reinforce the hypothesis that the hero, Bronson, battled ghosts in his mind long after the war ended. The image of a strong man on screen wrestling with invisible fears in the dark of night is a poignant contrast. Compared to other veterans of his era, Bronson's case was not isolated. Many soldiers returning from World War II Korea or Vietnam faced a severe lack of medical and psychological support resources. In the 1940s and 1950s, the concept of PTSD was not well understood or widely recognized as it is today. Therefore, individuals like Bronson, if they exhibited symptoms such as anxiety, depression, or difficulty regulating emotions, often had to cope on their own or were dismissed as having personal problems rather than receiving the necessary professional treatment. This further exacerbated their feelings of isolation and burden. Even though Charles Bronson reached the pinnacle of his acting career, becoming one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, money and fame could not fully heal the emotional wounds of war. This shows that sometimes the deepest pains don't come from material deprivation, but from a lack of understanding and unresolved psychological trauma. His life is clear evidence that a person can be a hero on screen, but still face silent, persistent battles in real life where there are no cameras or cheering audiences. Charles Bronson's legacy lies not only in his unforgettable on-screen roles, but also in the authentic story of a veteran, a human being who lived, fought, and carried his wounds until the end of his life. His story is a powerful call to society to raise awareness about the difficulties veterans face. We need a deeper understanding and empathy, and to build a more comprehensive and effective support system so that no soldier is left behind after completing their duty. Charles Bronson lived an extraordinary life, but one also marked by silent tragedy. His story will forever be a reminder that heroes don't just exist in movies. They are flesh and blood people carrying stories and wounds that need to be heard and healed. What do you think about the harsh realities Charles Bronson had to face? Do you know any other stories about veterans who have overcome or are struggling with similar difficulties? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow us. Many more interesting stories are waiting for you in the coming days.